Catherine Holmes was an ambitious mother of two.
She lived her life at about 90 miles an hour.
4.0 GPA, criminal justice degree, and had a great job in loss prevention.
But her marriage was a failure.
It felt more right to get divorced than it felt to get married in the first place.
Then their contentious divorce took a dangerous turn.
Someone in a black hoodie walks up and shoots Andy Holmes in the back of the head.
I heard the gunshot, I turned around, and I didn't see Andy at all.
Police quickly tracked down the gunman and his connection to Catherine.
He was willing to do anything to impress Kitty.
But did her lovesick friend act on his own?
The second that I realized that it was him that actually did the shooting, I was terrified.
Or did the mother of two put him up to it?
He is just her pawn.
She was the mastermind behind this crime.
August 24th, 2011, Antioch, Tennessee. Just before 7 p.m., 27-year-old Catherine Holmes was meeting her estranged husband, Andy, in front of her apartment complex in the Nashville suburb. He was dropping off their 1-year-old son and 5-year-old daughter just days before a key hearing in their contentious custody battle.
We did our exchanges at the front office of the apartment complex because it's a highly populated, busy area.
That's because in recent weeks, Catherine claimed her estranged husband had been harassing her.
She had an order of protection in place, and she was getting raps on the door all night long. She was getting random phone calls and everything else.
To avoid further conflict, they exchanged the children in a neutral public location.
It's August. It's by a swimming pool, a tennis court, a playground. People are walking everywhere.
It's still light outside, and this apartment complex was very busy, had a lot of traffic.
But the routine exchange was about to go horribly wrong.
Someone in a black hoodie walks up, doesn't really say anything, and shoots Andy Holmes in the back of the head.
Catherine was just a few feet away, loading their children into her car.
He was standing in his driver's side door. I was climbing in my driver's side door, and that was when I heard the gunshot.
At that point, pandemonium, all hell breaks loose.
I was scared. I was terrified for my kids. I was terrified for myself.
When the police and paramedics arrived, Andy was rushed to Vanderbilt Medical Center. He was alive, but in critical condition.
I stayed right there and I helped. I helped the paramedics. I gave them all his information.
He had been shot directly in the back of his head. The bullet has pierced his outer skull.
Meanwhile, Catherine was taken to the police station to make a formal witness statement.
I asked her if she was all right about that, and she says, yeah, Mama, this is what I got to do.
She was not a suspect at the time, but it was clear that she had seen what had happened.
And with their father's future uncertain, the couple's two children were clearly traumatized.
At that point, my granddaughter was keening Andy's name over and over and over again.
My daughter kept asking me if she could go and see him too, and I told her as soon as he was able.
What Catherine didn't know was that her future was also in jeopardy. Born in 1984, Catherine Wiles was a Tennessee native who had never strayed far from home.
I was born in Nashville, raised in Smyrna, Tennessee, lived in the same place my whole life with my parents.
The youngest of three, Catherine, known as Kitty to her family, was an outgoing teenager.
She collected critters and people just everywhere she went. She was like the neighborhood Pied Piper for kids.
Quiet is not Catherine. Kitty is outgoing, she's friendly, she's a great friend. She's always been there when I needed her.
While she was still in high school, Catherine took a part-time job at a local pizza place.
She worked from the time she was 16 on. She started out working at Chuck E. Cheese, and she became the Big Cheese.
It was there that she met Barry Hayslip, a local boy 2 years younger than Catherine.
They were in high school. He saw her as a little bit older woman. He fell in love with her pretty much immediately.
But Catherine wasn't interested.
He'd always had a crush on me, but we'd never dated or gone out or anything of that sort.
And as Catherine finished high school, she left Chuck E. Cheese and her friendship with Barry behind her.
Graduated top of my class with honors. Went to college. I went to MTSU and TSU. Majored in criminal justice and double minored in English and psychology.
Well, she's got street smarts as well as book smarts. She's a total package. She's a straight A student.
But in late 2005, 21-year-old Catherine dropped out of college because she was pregnant.
She was born in 2006, a healthy, bouncing baby girl, and she was living at home at the time with us.
The child's father was out of the picture, but soon, with her parents' help, Catherine was once again moving towards a career in law enforcement, working as a loss prevention officer at several local stores.
She would look for shoplifters. They also looked for employee theft, but I mean, she would roam the halls and aisles, pretend to be a shopper, and catch anybody she could.
She was basically training to become a police officer. She was a full-time mom, a full-time worker, a full-time everything. She lived her life at about 90 miles an hour.
And at 22, Catherine was about to add one more thing to her busy life: love. In 2007, she met someone at work, a 23-year-old named Joel Andrew Holmes.
I met Andy at Bass Pro. I was the team lead of loss prevention there, and he worked with the cashiers. We met. He was a nice, sweet guy.
Andy's family seemed to approve of the new couple.
Our first impression of Catherine was very positive. Very well dressed, very well mannered, seemed to obviously care for Joel. So we were quite pleased to see the relationship.
After a year of dating, Andy and Kitty married in July 2008, and Andy eventually adopted Catherine's 4-year-old daughter.
He wanted to be a father to her child. He wanted to have children with her.
I chose him because he was such a nice, quiet guy and would allow me to continue with my school and career.
And Andy helped her make that happen.
They had agreed for her to go to school, get her degree in criminal justice, and then Andy would just work part-time, keep the children.
For a while, that arrangement seemed to work.
Their marriage seemed to be progressing wonderfully. I specifically asked, how is everybody? How are things going? And she replied they were just absolutely wonderful.
That may be what she told Andy's family. But as Catherine confided to her mother, the couple's relationship wasn't quite as perfect as everyone believed.
Their personalities didn't match that well. She was more gung-ho, let's get it done and everything else, and we're a very do-it-yourself family, and he wasn't raised like that.
He was just kind of a laid-back guy, letting things happen as they happened. He was content to do what he was doing.
With Andy working part-time and Catherine working and going to school, money was tight. And the stress only intensified in 2009 when Catherine realized she was pregnant.
I had another child on the way, needed more income coming in.
Nearly 2 years into their marriage, after Catherine gave birth to their son, she urged Andy to go back to school or look for a better job to help support their growing family.
He told me that me and the children were not enough motivation for him to change anything in his life.
As her marriage faltered, Catherine continued working, moving to a loss prevention job at CVS. There, she met a 24-year-old pharmacy technician named Billy Pierce.
I just, happened to see her in the halls and kept thinking, I saw her again like 4 hours later. I'm like, she's still here.
He and Catherine began talking and seemed to hit it off.
Oh, she was great. I mean, she was funny, sarcastic, witty, outgoing,
She was also married, but that was about to change. In December of 2010, Catherine sat down with her husband, Andy, and told him their marriage was over.
She'd come home one day and asked him if he believed in love at first sight, that she thought she'd fallen in love with a coworker.
Though nothing had happened yet, Catherine told Andy that her feelings for Billy were so strong that she couldn't continue living with him.
They were on the outs, she had 2 great kids. She seemed like a happy person, was just kind of wanting to move on with her life, wasn't working anymore.
We both decided, and in his words, he said it felt more right to get divorced than it felt to get married in the first place.
Though Andy's family says the decision wasn't mutual.
She had just announced that she no longer wanted to be in the marriage. He was basically beside himself.
Andy moved in with his parents, And Catherine and the children were soon looking for a new place to live as well.
I couldn't afford the house anymore. I'd been left with all the payments on everything, and it was impossible supporting 2 children by myself to do it.
As Catherine looked for an apartment, her divorce got underway.
It was kind of like the ideal divorce. I mean, they had everything worked out. You take this, you have that, we'll share the kids.
And with her divorce going smoothly, Catherine began to pursue her relationship with Billy.
Everything was great, even to the point where he invited Billy over to the house one night when we were hanging out. And he wanted to meet the man that was going to be with Kitty and be with the kids.
I was happy to see that she was moving on and trying to get happy with her life, you know.
Nearly 6 months after her separation, Catherine and the children moved in with Billy, a move that seemed to threaten her amicable split with Andy.
He decided he wanted it all, and she was not going to have anything when he got done with her. And then it got ugly.
Catherine claimed her soon-to-be ex-husband was suddenly very unhappy about the divorce.
He went from like this really passive guy to just kind of like stalker guy.
He kept calling 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day. Would not call, would keep calling, would keep emailing, keep coming by the house. Wouldn't go away.
She would call me and be hysterical on the phone and crying.
According to Catherine, that's when she took legal measures to ensure she and her children were protected.
Kitty got a restraining order against Andy.
That didn't mean anything much to him. He just violated it anyways.
But Andy disputed the accusations of harassment, even challenging the claim that resulted in the order of protection.
All those allegations that Catherine had made were subsequently found in court to be not true.
Just months after their amicable split, the divorce was becoming a bitter battle over their children.
He just wasn't willing to walk away from his 2 children.
She's very involved in her children's lives, and she knew that the children's place was with her.
But moving in with Billy may have jeopardized Catherine's case for sole custody.
Rutherford County Divorce Court had made the statement that if Catherine wants a boyfriend, that's fine, but get a divorce first.
Was it possible custody battle?
She was about to have a very pivotal child custody hearing within the next 10 days.
But Andy wouldn't make it to court. Coming up, a hooded gunman takes a shot at Andy.
Looked over and didn't see Andy anymore.
But police suspect Catherine knows more than she's letting on.
I did not immediately recognize her.
August 24, 2011, Antioch, Tennessee. It was just after 7 p.m. when 28-year-old Andy Holmes dropped off his 2 children with his estranged wife, Catherine, in front of her apartment complex. The couple was embroiled in a custody battle after the collapse of their 2-year marriage.
There was kind of a situation between the 2 of them where their divorce had been kind of nasty.
Which is why Catherine and Andy exchanged custody in a public location.
It's still light outside, and this apartment complex was very busy, had a lot of traffic. It's just not the place that you would expect that a shooting would occur at that time.
But that's exactly what happened next.
She's putting her children in her truck, and she's got them secured. She's turning back around to get a diaper bag or something, and she hears a shot ring out.
I heard the gunshot. I turned around, and I didn't see Andy at all.
Andy had been shot once in the back of the head and lay bleeding on the pavement.
I saw him laying on the ground. I just started screaming. There were 2 women who ran up to help, and they called 911. And pretty much a blur after that.
Police and paramedics were on scene within minutes. And Andy, still alive but in critical condition, was rushed to Vanderbilt Medical Center.
It had made a very large indention on his inner skull, which caused brain trauma and bleeding. He had shattered his left cheekbone, and his left internal jugular vein had been ruptured.
With Andy clinging to life, Catherine called his friends and family.
I called Andy's mother and told her what happened and begged her to go to the hospital.
She also comforted their 5-year-old daughter and 1-year-old son.
When the paramedics showed up, I was trying to calm my kids down and make sure they were okay and everything else.
She's completely distraught. Her children are there.
But as police secured the scene and took statements from the other witnesses, something about Catherine's behavior immediately after the shooting struck them as odd.
When people came to the victim's aid and came to Joel's aid, they got down and were trying to help him to stop the bleeding. She never went over and tried to help him.
Was Catherine in shock, or was it something else? Police weren't sure.
She acted extremely distraught, screaming, upset, to the point where she couldn't get it together until she started being questioned by the police, and her demeanor kind of changed, and she was telling them about what happened, but she wasn't quite as upset as she initially was.
Based on the evidence and witnesses at the scene, it was clear Catherine hadn't pulled the trigger. But given the custody battle and her odd behavior, detectives naturally wondered if she knew who was responsible for her husband's shooting.
The police suspected Kitty right away, even though she stayed at the scene of the crime and stayed with her husband Andy for some time.
At the hospital, Andy was clinging to life, though the doctors and his family weren't sure if he would make it through the night.
When we arrived at the hospital and the doctor started talking to us, there was still no indication of whether Joel would survive this or not.
As for Catherine, she was transported to the Metro Police Station to answer some questions about her estranged husband's shooting.
Their divorce had been kind of nasty. They were not on good terms, so the police knew that going into the interview.
Catherine told police she had just picked up the children from Andy when the shooting occurred.
I turned my back and was in the truck. I had no clue what happened.
But Catherine had seen someone seconds after the gunshot.
I saw a guy that I had seen walking up and down the sidewalk talking on the phone and running away.
The guy you saw pacing back and forth, who was he?
I did not immediately recognize him.
Was Catherine just an innocent bystander? She initially told police that she had arrived alone that evening. But as the interview went on, Catherine revealed something new. She had brought someone with her to the apartment complex.
She said, well, I actually did have a friend that went over there with me.
According to Catherine, that wasn't unusual. Ever since she had gotten the restraining order against Andy, she always brought a witness with her when they exchanged the children.
I normally go with her to every drop-off and every pickup.
She would always take someone with her just as backup in case something was said that she could use in the divorce proceedings.
But on August 24th, Catherine brought someone else. Someone her friends and family thought had been out of her life for a long time. Barry Hayslip.
We ran into each other in January of 2011 at my work. He was getting a prescription filled and just kind of started talking again.
And just like in high school, Barry still had a crush on Catherine, though he was no longer an awkward teenager.
He's got the tattoos and the gangster haircut and all this. He dresses like some kind of a street thug.
But according to Barry, he was in a motorcycle gang. He had tons of money stashed that, if Kitty just went with him, he'd pay for her divorce. And she was like, I'm kind of living with Billy. I'm in love with Billy. I'm going to have to say no to that.
But they had still rekindled their friendship. And on August 24th, Catherine told the police that Barry was her last resort.
I'd called around family and friends. Nobody could go with me.
Yeah, I called her and said, I'm not going to be able to make it. I said, I thought my classes might have gotten out early. They didn't.
I had to be at work at, 5:30 in Nashville. So I told her, I said, I can't do it.
When the time for the exchange approached, and Catherine still hadn't found someone to accompany her, she called Barry.
I finally contacted Barry, who said he had to go over to the apartment complex anyway.
According to Catherine, she dropped Barry off inside the complex, and he was supposed to meet her back at the front entrance later.
He wasn't there, but her husband was. So she figured, well, he doesn't have anybody with him. I'll go ahead and just do the exchange, and hopefully nothing will go bad for it.
But something had gone wrong. And eventually, Catherine told the police that she may have recognized the gunman.
She changed it to, okay, actually, I think I know who it was, but I didn't know he was going to do this.
I did not immediately recognize it as Barry at that point. His back was primarily to us. He came up and was rounding the corner on the sidewalk, and I kind of did the double take.
They pressed her and insinuated to her that she actually knew who it was, at which point she told them that she thought maybe that it was Barry Hayslip.
As for why Barry might have tried to kill her husband, Catherine admitted that she had complained to Barry about her divorce.
The night before the shooting, we were talking, and I'm going through a divorce. Nobody likes a divorce. I was complaining about things. He's made the same statement over and over in the past. I'll take care of things. You want me to handle it for you?
He was somewhat obsessed with Kitty, even so much so as to say he would have done anything to impress Kitty.
According to Catherine, Barry had taken her complaints much more seriously than she had ever intended him to.
I hoped, but I didn't believe. I thought maybe he was going to go stand over there, try to scare him.
What she said was she hoped he would do it, but she didn't actually believe that he would.
What's Barry going to say when we ask him if you do that? So we'll find him.
Well, he's going to, I told you we did discuss it. I did not believe he was going to follow through with it. I called him on his bluff. So I believe he will say, yes, I talked to her about it.
Catherine told police that realizing what her friend was capable of frightened her.
I gotta clear this up. Why did you lie in the beginning?
I was scared about what he would do because he's told me flat out anybody ever goes against outlaws, they're dead. The second that I realized that it was him that actually did the shooting, I was terrified. For 10 years that I'd known him, he was nothing but talk. And all of a sudden, he was a man of action, and I was scared.
Despite what she had just told police, Catherine maintained she had nothing to do with the shooting.
I wouldn't have ever set up something like that. It's 7 o'clock. It's broad daylight. Me and my 2 kids were in the line of fire. That's stupid. Nobody would do that. Nobody.
Police had significant questions about Catherine's story and her role in the shooting.
It went from being where she said that she had seen someone do the shooting to she knew who it was, and then she ultimately admitted that she knew Barry Hayslip was going to do this.
Despite her admission, police would need more evidence to arrest her. So after 4 hours of interrogation, they released Catherine. However, the detectives impounded Catherine's truck to search it for any additional evidence. And they found something, a secret prepaid cell phone.
She had kind of hidden the track phone in her car. In that particular track phone, there were 2 numbers and only 2 numbers.
Detectives would examine the phones more thoroughly. But first, they needed to find the alleged gunman, Barry Hayslip. Coming up, Barry gives police his version.
The police really didn't have to lean on him very hard.
And police discover some incriminating texts.
I love you more than anything. That was the last text message that she sent to Barry Hayslip.
On August 24, 2011, 28-year-old Joel Andrew Holmes had been shot outside his estranged wife Catherine's apartment complex. In the hours since, he'd been fighting for his life at Nashville's Vanderbilt Medical Center.
Thankfully, the bullet actually didn't penetrate too far into the back of his skull.
Still, Andy's condition was touch and go throughout the night, until doctors finally managed to stabilize him.
And it was not until the next morning that we found out definitely that Joel should survive this.
He miraculously, thankfully, was able to survive and with no lasting issues because of it.
Andy had narrowly escaped death, but the police and Andy's family suspected this was no random shooting.
The first evening at the hospital, while we felt that Catherine was involved in this, we had no idea of what her level of involvement might be.
Just hours after the attack, police had the name of his alleged gunman, Barry Hayslip.
We had never heard of Mr. Hayslip. There was no connection at all, other than he happened to know Catherine.
During a police interview, Catherine had identified Barry as the person who shot her estranged husband. And at 3:45 that morning, just 9 hours after the shooting, Metro Police arrested Barry at his home.
Barry was taken into custody, and they questioned him for just a few minutes.
In the interrogation room, Barry didn't deny his role in the shooting.
I believe it was within 15 minutes he confessed to shooting Andy Holmes.
The police really didn't have to lean on him very hard.
But Barry also claimed he didn't act alone.
When Barry admitted to shooting Andy, he also implicated Kitty as being involved.
He admitted that he and Kitty Holmes had planned to murder Andy Holmes and that he was in love with her.
According to Barry, Catherine had told him about the custody dispute with her soon-to-be ex-husband.
He had a crush on her. He asked if he could help with any of her problems, and she said that she needed real solutions.
And if Barry could provide that solution, he said Catherine insinuated she would leave her current boyfriend to be with him, something Barry had wanted since he first met her in high school.
The reason that he had gone through with it was because he thought that they would be together.
Barry also told police that Catherine had given him the gun.
He informed them that she had given him the gun on 4 separate occasions during a 45-minute interview with the police.
Once the interview was over, Barry was charged with attempted criminal homicide and transferred to the jail. Though Barry had clearly implicated Catherine, police were not yet ready to charge her. Instead, they quietly began investigating her story.
The shooting took place at the end of August, and we spent most of that fall and then the early part of January just making sure that we had everything done. There wasn't any other piece of the investigation that we couldn't complete.
Meanwhile, Catherine and Billy tried to move on.
She kept on working, supporting her kids and everything else.
I thought that, after I cooperated with the police and passed the polygraph and everything else, that everything was okay.
Catherine believed Barry Hayslip's confession meant the authorities considered the case solved. But she was wrong.
The police department brought me the case file and said, "We've got the shooter, but we think there's more to this case."
Based on Barry's interview, the police tracked down the gun used in the shooting. They found it in the Hayslip family's attic.
The handgun was Mr. Hayslip's gun. It had been in his family since the 1970s, and he had it the entire time.
If Barry had lied about Catherine giving him the gun, could police be wrong about her involvement in the shooting?
She had never handled the weapon. The gun, actually, that Barry Hayslip used had been up in his parents' attic for years and years and years. And the fact that the gun was so old and the ammunition was so old was probably the reason that Andy Holmes is alive today.
Still, not all of the evidence pointed to Catherine's innocence. Police had examined the 2 phones found in her car the night of the shooting, and the second prepaid phone revealed something interesting.
Kitty had one phone that she would use to call everybody else. And then she had a very specific disposable phone that, as far as we can tell, she would only use to contact Barry Hayslip.
There were more than, I believe, about 300 text messages between her and Mr. Hayslip back and forth.
And the phone record painted a picture of Catherine and Barry's relationship that was completely different from what she had told the police.
It was very clear when you look at these text messages that there was a kind of desperation in them. I love you more than anything. That was the last text message that she sent to Barry Hayslip before he shot her husband.
The phone records also seemed to support Barry's claim that he and Catherine had planned the shooting.
There was a very specific text message where Mr. Hayslip said, "Can we do this later?" He was getting cold feet, and there was a text message response from Kitty saying, "We have to do this now because I don't know where he's going to be later."
She said, "We have to do this tonight. It has to be tonight. This is the only way that I'll know where he is and when he's going to be there."
The text proved Catherine had lied to police about her involvement and her relationship with Barry, and they gave the authorities enough evidence to move forward.
Once we felt like we had all the investigation that could possibly be done, we decided to indict her.
On January 25, 2012, more than 5 months after the shooting, a warrant was issued for Catherine's arrest. The news stunned the mother of 2 and her family.
I was in complete shock. It was 6 months after everything had occurred. wasn't expecting anything to happen.
She goes, I thought this was over because this should have already been taking place. I thought I was just a witness.
I mean, there was no police contact, no phone calls, no emails, no text messages, no lawyers, no asked for, can we interview you again? Can we get any DNA? Nothing until the warrant was issued for her arrest.
On January 30th, 27-year-old Catherine turned herself in.
Her bond was set at $200,000. It's $100,000 higher than what Mr. Hayslip's bond was set for.
Facing up to 25 years in prison, Catherine posted bond and began to prepare for the fight of her life. Coming up, Andy takes the stand against his ex-wife.
I had received a gunshot wound to the back of the head.
As prosecutors try to prove Catherine was the mastermind.
He is just her pawn. He is the implement that she used to commit this crime.
September 10th, 2012, Nashville, Tennessee. 28-year-old Catherine Holmes walked into a Davidson County courtroom to face a charge of attempted first-degree murder. She was accused of planning the 2011 shooting of her then-husband, Andy, in an attempt to end their custody dispute. And the confessed gunman, Barry Hayslip, claimed she had put him up to it.
At the end of the day, what we had was the person who pulled the trigger was saying he did it for love.
But prosecutors had more than just Barry's word. They also had hundreds of text messages between Barry and Catherine from a prepaid phone found in her truck.
The best evidence in this case, in my opinion, were the text messages that we had on Kitty Holmes' phone.
In its open, the prosecution painted Catherine as a scheming woman who used Barry in an attempt to get rid of her soon-to-be ex-husband.
The fair reading of the proof was that Ms. Holmes instigated Mr. Hayslip to take the actions that he did to put him into contact with her husband and basically told him to pull the trigger. He is just her pawn. He is the implement that she used to commit this crime.
But in its opening statement, the defense described Catherine as a hardworking mother of two whose life had been derailed by the shooting.
This situation has done nothing but hurt me. I was doing great then. I was getting ready to get promoted. As soon as I graduated, I was finally have my degree and be able to do something for my children.
Her attorney argued that she was a victim of a man obsessed, that Barry Hayslip had acted completely on his own in a misguided attempt to win her love.
She steadfastly maintained that events were put into action. She never anticipated, she never wanted, she never dreamt would actually occur.
The defense also argued that Catherine didn't have any reason to want Andy dead because she was in no danger of losing custody of her children.
The divorce was going her way. There had been a couple of minor setbacks, nothing that would in any way indicate that she had any reason to be concerned.
Nor did she stand to gain from Andy's death, according to the defense.
She canceled his life insurance policy. So if he had died, she would have not received a single penny from anyone.
I had no financial motivation at all.
As testimony began, one of the prosecution's first witnesses was Andy Holmes, who told jurors what he could about the night of his shooting.
When I got the kids out of the car, and the last thing I actually remember of that night, I was holding my son and daughter waiting for her to show up.
Andy testified that the next thing he remembered was waking up in the hospital.
What kind of injury did you suffer, Mr. Holmes?
I had received a gunshot wound to the back of the head. I had a fractured skull, 2 cracked vertebrae, a fractured cheekbone, and a ruptured anterior jugular vein.
The next day, the prosecution's star witness, confessed gunman Barry Hayslip, took the stand and cast the blame on Catherine.
What did she ask you to do?
Take care of him.
And what did you believe she meant by that?
And he told the jury that the reason he did it was love.
I thought she loved me, so I did pretty much anything for somebody I love.
Even though Barry was a sketchy character in real life, he came across as very sympathetic at trial. He became very emotional. He cried on the stand.
But on cross-examination, the defense questioned Barry's story, pointing out that his claim that Catherine had given him the gun was a lie.
When in fact, she didn't give it to you, did she?
No, sir.
You had that gun the entire time, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
The defense also questioned why Barry had cleaned up his bad boy appearance.
He showed up in court. He had slimmed down, grown his hair out, comb over, shaved off the goatee. He got up on the stand and he cried.
Isn't it true that this is one more attempt on your part to make someone think that you're more impressive than you actually are?
No, sir.
Would the jury believe that Barry acted at Catherine's direction? On September 13th, 4 days into the trial, Catherine took the stand to tell her story. She started by describing the shooting.
What was your initial reaction?
I freaked out. Absolute shock. I can't even begin to describe. That was absolutely the most horrible event I'd ever experienced in my life.
I was there when Catherine testified. I thought it was an Academy Award-winning act.
Catherine was adamant that she had nothing to do with the shooting and that she never asked Barry to do it either.
I would complain about things with the divorce, and Barry would be like, "You want me to take care of it? I'll take care of it for you. You offered to take care of everything. You're not going to do anything."
But you never thought?
No.
Some loose talk about, oh, I wish somebody would take care of my husband, doesn't explain why she picked him up, drove him over there, and essentially pointed out who her husband was to the man who was going to shoot him.
On cross-examination, the prosecutors turned to the hundreds of text messages Catherine had sent Barry, professing her love.
You were going to tell him you loved him and tell him you needed him, right?
I did need him, and I did love him. I love my best friend, Jhene. I love my mom. I love a lot of people.
She had an answer for everything, and she just refused to admit the things that she could not deny.
And Catherine's demeanor on the stand may have done more harm than good.
She was very smug in the courtroom, and I think it hurt her. I think it didn't make her look like a person who was a victim of circumstance like she wanted the jury to believe.
There's a double standard when it comes to women. Men can be confident and maybe even overconfident, and a jury still like them. But when a woman becomes overconfident, the jury may think that that's arrogance.
Catherine and her attorney blamed her behavior on the conditions of the trial.
Kitty was kept up all night. She wasn't able to sleep. She wasn't able to prepare for the reality of testifying in front of a jury.
My lack of emotion during that part of the trial, in which I wasn't coherent of anything that was going on, I believe had a lot to do with it.
As the trial wrapped up, the prosecutors once again argued that Catherine would stop at nothing to get what she wanted.
Miss Holmes is a Black Widow spider who essentially brought Barry Hayslip into her web, poisoned him against her husband, and then attempted to have him killed.
The defense dismissed the prosecution's theory and reminded jurors that someone had already confessed to the shooting.
That's nonsense. The person who shot Annie Holmes was Barry Hayslip.
Coming up, the jury deliberates.
They were out for several hours.
But will Catherine get the verdict she expects?
I didn't think it looked too good.
On September 14, 2012, 28-year-old Catherine Holmes was back in a Nashville, Tennessee courtroom, awaiting the verdict in her trial. Charged with attempted first-degree murder, she faced up to 25 years in prison if convicted. The mother of two was accused of planning the shooting of her then-husband, Andy Holmes, during a 2011 custody dispute.
Our theory of this case is that she is criminally responsible for the conduct of the shooter because she was the mastermind behind this crime. But for Kitty Holmes, this whole crime would never have happened.
After 5 days of testimony, Catherine's fate was now in the hands of the jury.
The jury went through it for a long time, and so they were out for several hours.
I didn't have a good feeling about it. I was hoping for the best, but I didn't think it looked too good.
And when the jury foreperson read the verdict, her family's fears were confirmed.
We, the jury, unanimously find Catherine Louise Holmes for the offense of attempt to commit premeditated first-degree murder guilty.
I was in utter shock that I was found guilty. I believe that the jury based it off of not the actual evidence in the trial, but off of more emotional reactions.
Catherine's family was just as shocked.
To look at the fact you're going to lose your daughter, I mean, that's the scariest thing you can face.
I burst into tears.
But for Andy and his family, the verdict was only a partial victory.
Upon hearing the conviction, my immediate reaction was one of relief, but also one of sorrow.
At her sentencing on November 1st, 2012, Catherine's friends and family asked the court for mercy. But the judge saw the case differently.
I don't know that there's much colder or more calculating a murder by manipulation.
The judge sentenced her to 22 years in prison and made one more observation about Catherine's demeanor.
While I've noticed a lot of crying on behalf of Ms. Holmes here at the sentencing hearing today, her reactions facially and body language and otherwise at the trial were totally different. She's able to manipulate not only other people, but her own personality in order to always put her in a good light.
Despite her conviction, Catherine maintains her innocence.
The justice system isn't as true as I thought it was. That what you learn in the books isn't what really happens. I've lost a lot of faith that I had in that justice system.
But to her former father-in-law, her children are the true victims in this case.
We now have 2 grandchildren that are going to have to go through life without knowing their mother, but most importantly, they're going to have to go through life knowing now what she did to their father.
Humans are peculiar creatures. They will end a human life for the most absurd and ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine, but when you strip away all the nonsense, it almost always comes down to the oldest sin in the book, which is greed. I tell you, when you look deep into the abyss of human nature, you see that some men are nothing more than hollow shells driven by a pathetic desperation for unearned wealth. Take the case of Nicholas Cordova. Nick was a 40-year-old man and a father and a provider who pulled himself up by his own effort. He was raised by his grandparents and stepped up as a father figure for his younger siblings when he was just a kid himself. He was a decent and hard-working man who wanted nothing more than to build a legacy for his family and be his own boss in the heating and air conditioning business. He loved his wife Alicia and his 2 children so deeply that his very last moments on this earth were spent looking at their sweet faces on a video telephone call. But that innate goodness and that trusting nature was exactly what the wolves smelled. Enter his business partner, David Sweetman. I use the word partner very loosely. My. If you want to find a snake, you just look in the tall grass. Sweetman was a walking warning sign with a history of fraud and assault and trespassing. He was a man utterly obsessed with money, but completely incapable of earning it honestly. Nick bought into this business, thinking he was building a dream, but he was really walking blindfolded into a trap. Months before the murder, the company funds started disappearing. $30,000 here and $15,000 there. Sweetman was bleeding the place dry, and then comes the insurance policy. Millions of dollars on the line. Sweetman actually suggested they take out life insurance policies on each other to protect the business. You have to be kidding me. You might as well paint a massive target directly on your own back. Nick knew it deep down. He told his wife he felt like he was being watched in the weeks leading up to his death. He told her he feared his partner would hire an assassin just to collect the insurance money. The intuition of a man is a powerful thing, and the gut of Nick was screaming at him to run. Fast forward to a Wednesday evening in May of 2020. It is shortly after 5:30 in the evening. Nick is sitting at his desk. He is on a video call with his 5-year-old daughter and her brother. They are innocent and safe, or so he thinks. Suddenly, 2 men wearing face masks and gloves walk to the front door, carrying a hollowed-out cardboard box to hide a firearm. The surveillance cameras catch the entry, but conveniently the one room without cameras is the office where the supposed robbery takes place. We hear shouting and a violent struggle. Nick runs for his life toward the lobby and toward the front door, trying desperately to get back to his family and try and survive. But a coward steps up right behind him and shoots him once in the face, leaving him to bleed out and die on the floor. It is cold and it is calculated, and it is a targeted execution. And where is David Sweetman during all of this chaos? He claims he was right there getting robbed himself. When the police arrive, he hands an officer his own weapon through the door, claiming it was never fired. He tells a fantastic and ridiculous tale about 2 Hispanic men wanting to sell refrigerant. He says they pulled a weapon on him and took everything he had, and then hit him on the head, knocking him out so perfectly that he missed the entire murder of his business partner. I tell you, the lies these criminals tell are insulting to the intelligence of a cinder block. When the officers pat this grief-stricken partner down, what do they find? They find over $1,000 in cash stuffed right into his front pocket. He told them the robbers took everything. But suddenly his memory recovers, and he remembers they only took the money from his other pocket. You have to be kidding me. You expect any seasoned detective to believe that 2 armed robbers who are desperate enough to commit murder in broad daylight took the time to politely honor the sanctity of your left pants pocket. It is completely absurd, and it speaks to the arrogance of a man who thinks he is the smartest person in the room. This was not a robbery gone wrong. This was a coordinated assassination. Look at the psychology of the man. Sweetman was acting incredibly strange the day before the murder, pacing around the office and constantly asking the manager when Nick would be coming in. Just minutes before the killers arrived, he is seen on the security camera peeking through the window, blinds looking out into the parking lot, right as that old 2-tone red and silver pickup truck pulls up. He was waiting for them to arrive. And the moment Nick is cold in the ground, Sweetman is already sending text messages to the grieving widow demanding she sign insurance documents so he can get his greedy hands on a massive payout that totaled $8 million. The sheer lack of human empathy is chilling to the bone. He even allegedly forged her signature when she refused to cooperate. He took the client list and started a brand new business right out of his own house, while the company Nick poured his heart into went bankrupt and closed its doors. And yet, due to a mountain of redacted files and lost evidence and bureaucratic shuffling within the local police department, this man continues to walk free today. Alicia is left terrified and begging for justice, while the killers of her husband remain unidentified. The truth is sitting right there buried in the files. The missing money and the perfectly timed cameras and the forged documents all point to a very dark reality. The perpetrators might think they have committed the perfect crime and gotten away with murder, but the dead speak if you are only willing to listen. Nicholas Cordova is screaming for justice from the grave. It is only a matter of time before this fragile house of cards collapses, because guilt is a very heavy burden to carry, and eventually somebody always talks. Humans are peculiar creatures. They kill for the most absurd reasons you can imagine, but usually it all boils down to 2 ancient sins, greed and control. I tell you, I have looked into the eyes of hundreds of killers, and the absolute worst of the lot are the ones who wear a mask of suburban respectability while rotting from the inside out. Let's talk about Laura Sweetman. Laura was a brilliant woman, a pediatric neurologist who spent her days trying to heal sick children, yet she was entirely blind to the sickness festering in her own home. She married her high school sweetheart, a man named Dave, and from the outside, they were the perfect California dream. But behind closed doors, Dave was systematically dismantling her self-worth. That is what cowards do. They cannot elevate themselves, so they grind their partners into the dirt. For years, Laura lived in psychological prison, belittled, manipulated, and isolated until April of 2013, when she made a discovery that shattered her reality. She found out her beloved husband had a completely separate, secret family, complete with a preschool-age child. You have to be kidding me. The sheer arrogance it takes to maintain that level of deception is staggering. It finally gave Laura the courage to pack her bags and demand a divorce. But men like Dave do not just let go of their possessions. On the night she tried to leave, a confrontation occurred. She actually recorded the whole ordeal for over an hour. You can hear her pleading for help while he threatened to end his own life. A classic manipulative tactic used by domestic abusers to hold their victims hostage through guilt. The police were called. He was arrested for assault, but the charges were dropped because the system demands perfect victims and perfect evidence. So, Laura got a protective order in a rental house, desperate to rebuild her shattered life. She started dating, trying to find her footing, going out with a gym trainer named Will and a few other men, frantically searching for the human connection she had been denied for decades. But the fear never left her. She was terrified, constantly looking over her shoulder, convinced Dave was stalking her. She was so desperate she even committed prescription fraud just to cope with the crushing anxiety. It breaks your heart. Then comes the morning of December 9th, 2013. Laura fails to show up for her shifts at the hospital for children. Her nanny goes to check on her and finds the back door unlocked. A dog gate knocked completely out of place at the bottom of the stairs, and Laura dead in her bathtub. The water is there, but her face is not submerged. She is completely naked, foaming at the mouth, with mysterious fresh contusions on her head and bruises scattered across her body. Now, any rookie detective worth his badge would lock down that scene, declare a homicide, and start turning over every rock. But the Gilbert Police Department, I tell you, their incompetence is nothing short of breathtaking. When they go to notify the estranged husband, Dave, he meets them in the driveway, already crying before they even say a word. A magical premonition of grief, or the guilty conscience of a man who knows exactly why the police are at his door. They barely press him. They do not tear apart his alibi. They do not relentlessly interrogate the men she was seeing, like the trainer Will, who admitted to being at her house the night before, and then suspiciously deleted all their text messages because he supposedly had another girlfriend. They just let these glaring red flags flutter in the wind. A neighbor even reported a suspicious white vehicle idling outside Laura House for hours, recording the exact license plate number. Did the police track it down? No, they threw the tip in the garbage. But the absolute crescendo of this tragic farce lies in the medical examiner office. The autopsy was performed by a disgraced doctor who was previously caught taking a deceased Marine brain home to show his children. You heard me correctly. And the toxicology report was signed off by a laboratory director who once stole a gun from a police evidence room to sell at a pawn shop. These are the supposed experts entrusted to speak for the dead. The autopsy found zero internal trauma, a completely clean toxicology screen, and no definitive proof of drowning, despite the foam in her airways and the strange contusions on her skull. They blamed her death on a phantom heart attack from 2 years prior. A heart attack that left absolutely no physical scarring on her actual heart tissue. The ruling was undetermined, and the police essentially packed up their briefcases and closed the book. This was not an investigation. It was an insult to the badge. Laura Sweetman was a woman desperately clawing her way out of the dark. only to be dragged beneath the surface by a predator who knew exactly how to play the system, aided by a police department entirely devoid of curiosity. She deserved an advocate, someone who would look at that moved dog gate, that unlocked door, and those mysterious bruises, and refuse to sleep until the truth was dragged into the light. Instead, she got a parade of fools and a killer walking free, laughing at the sheer stupidity of it all. Humans are curious creatures. They destroy the things they vow to protect for the most absurd reasons you could possibly imagine, usually revolving around control, fragile egos, or a checking account. I tell you, in my years of looking at the dark side of the human soul, the true monsters do not wear masks and hide in alleys. They wear wedding rings. They sit across from you at the breakfast table. They smile at the neighbors while behind closed doors. They are slowly tightening a psychological noose. This brings us to the tragedy of a woman named Melissa, a devoted mother, an administrative assistant at a national laboratory in New Mexico, and a survivor of thyroid cancer. A woman who loved her teenage daughter, Sierra, more than life itself. On the 26th of June, 2025, Melissa vanished into thin air. The story her husband Mark tells is a masterpiece of manipulation, a desperate attempt to paint his wife as a runaway, a failure, a woman drowning in debt of her own making. But you look closely at the husband, and what do you see? Arrogance, an ego the size of the Grand Canyon. My. You have to be kidding me if you think seasoned investigators do not see right through that fragile facade. Let us walk through the timeline, shall we? It is early morning. They commute together. Mark claims they argued about a vapor cigarette. A trivial detail inserted to explain away the palpable tension of a failing marriage. Melissa drops him off, but instead of going to her desk, she drives the hour and 15 minutes back home. Why? She tells her daughter she forgot her security badge. A lie. We know she had it. She was buying time. Time to execute a desperate plan. At 8:02 in the morning, her old cellular telephone is reset to factory settings. All data wiped clean by someone who knows that digital footprints are the chains that keep you bound to your tormentor. You see, Melissa was suffocating. People whisper about the husband. They say he was controlling, financially and emotionally abusive. A man who isolated her, who took over the major bills and let her drown in the minor ones, draining her life force while he played the big man around town as a professional outfitter who claimed he could track anything in the wild. Melissa was living in a psychological prison where every day was a careful dance on broken glass. She knew that leaving a controller like Mark was not as simple as packing a bag and calling a lawyer. Men like Mark do not let their property just walk away. They escalate. She knew if she announced her departure, her life, or her daughter's life, could be in jeopardy, so she meticulously crafted an illusion. She brings her daughter a sandwich at 12:56 in the afternoon. A final look at her beautiful girl. The surveillance camera captures her. She is calm. The eerie calm of a woman who has finally made a terrifying decision after years of paralyzing fear. It was not a casual lunch drop-off. It was a silent, agonizing farewell. Her heart must have been breaking into a million pieces, screaming to hug her daughter and never let go, but her survival instinct dictated her actions. She knew Sierra was nearly grown, about to start beauty school, about to step into her own life. Melissa had to disappear to save herself, or perhaps someone else made her disappear. We must consider the alternative. At 1:38 in the afternoon, her primary cellular telephone is wiped. An hour later, she is captured on video walking down Highway 518 with a backpack. She is moving briskly, not fleeing, but walking with absolute purpose. The husband, Mark, seizes upon this video. He waves it around like a victory flag. See? She walked away. She abandoned us. But look at his behavior prior to discovering that tape. When a witness named Lloyd first reported seeing a woman stumbling near a blue truck, what did Mark do? Did he rush to the scene to find the love of his life? No, he actively convinced the police not to look. He said she was not wearing a white sweater. He said she did not have a limp. I tell you, a man whose wife is missing does not care if the witness described her wearing a polka suit and breathing fire. He goes to look. He searches the ends of the earth. But Mark shut the search down. Why? Because an arrogant man always believes he is the smartest person in the room. He needed the police looking elsewhere. He muddied the waters with evolving tales of affairs, ruined finances, and mysterious contractors. He even suggested she left so he could collect life insurance to pay for their daughter's schooling. My, the absolute audacity of that logic. And what about the physical evidence at the house? A pair of his hunting boots sitting by a fish tank, adorned with fresh mud. A stain on the floor that tests positive for blood. Mark claims the mud was old, rehydrated by a spill from the fish tank. He claims the blood was from an animal. It is always a convenient animal with these guys. But Mark had the house to himself after she vanished. He had the opportunity to sanitize, to stage, to twist the narrative to his liking. If Mark intercepted her on that highway, if he realized she was leaving him, his fragile, inflated ego would have shattered instantly. A controller cannot stand to lose control. If he caught her, the psychological rage would be blinding. He would view her departure not as a tragedy, but as an insult, an unforgivable act of defiance. The inner workings of a perpetrator like this are rooted in extreme narcissism. They view their partners not as human beings with independent agency, but as extensions of themselves. If the extension malfunctions, if it tries to detach, it must be destroyed. But the camera has caught her walking, alive. If she orchestrated this herself, it speaks to an unimaginable level of despair. To leave behind the child she adored, to leave her eyeglasses, to carefully pack a 90-day supply of thyroid medication, that is the detail that matters. A woman planning to end her own life does not pack a 90-day supply of survival. A woman fleeing a monster does. The tragedy here is the deafening silence left in her wake. The daughter left behind, caught in the web of a father who changes the locks 3 days after his wife vanishes. Who does that? You have a missing wife whose keys are sitting on your kitchen table, and your first priority is calling a locksmith? You have to be kidding me. That is not the action of a hopeful, grieving husband. That is the action of a man securing his domain. Whether Melissa successfully vanished into the ether to escape a life of quiet terror, or whether Mark caught up to her on that lonely stretch of highway and silenced her forever, the root cause remains the same. The toxic, suffocating control of a man who demanded absolute obedience. He sits there in the interview room, defensive, aggressive, deflecting every question, refusing polygraphs, blaming the victim's family, creating a circus of distraction. He thinks he has outsmarted everyone in the room. But the truth is a patient hunter. It does not tire. It does not sleep. The digital records, the deleted cloud backups, the mysterious friend from Colorado who suddenly denies ever visiting the daughter. Every lie is a breadcrumb. Every contradiction is a blinding spotlight. Melissa Casillas was a woman trapped in a corner, and she made a desperate move. Her mind must have been a hurricane of terror and determination on that June afternoon. Erasing her digital life was her way of severing the invisible strings that Mark used to puppet her existence. If she is out there, she is a master of evasion, driven by the ultimate human instinct to simply breathe free air without looking over her shoulder. If she is not, her silence is a permanent indictment of the man who claims he loved her. We will keep looking. We will keep peeling back the layers of deceit. Because no matter how clever the spider thinks he is, the web always unravels. Detective Motes of the York County Sheriff Office was also notified of the suspicions of the family about the death of Steve. Good morning, everybody. But when the autopsy report came in, it listed signs of heart disease and pointed to death by natural causes. Ah, yes, thank you. The initial autopsy still showed that it was likely a heart attack, but they had to wait for the toxicologist report to come back to finally make an actual finding. It would take a few weeks before those results arrived, so we waited on pins and needles for the truth to come out. We just knew that there was something Something was very wrong. Thank you. When the toxicology report on the blood of Steve Clayton came back, it was shocking. It showed traces of several sedatives, including marijuana, temazepam, and Benadryl. But that was not all. The biggest shock in the toxicology results was tetrahydrozoline, also known as THZ. It is the active ingredient in eye drops like Visine, Murine, or other over-the-counter eye drops. THZ is not ever meant to be ingested. Given in small doses, it makes you feel very ill. It makes you nauseous. It makes you dizzy. It will make you pass out eventually. But in large quantities, it is deadly. It shuts your central nervous system down, and it will kill you. The detectives learned that THZ can limit the blood supply to vital organs, leading to a heart attack. When the body cam went up there, the Visine you see was on the tall dresser that is away from the bed. That is where he could not get up to get the Visine. Now it is very clear, this is not a natural death. Detective Moats needed to have a talk with Lana Clayton. 5 weeks after the sudden death of her husband, Lana Clayton was questioned by detectives. You know, if you were a witness in this case for us, the detectives wanted to know more about the medications found in the blood of Steve. You know what he would say? He took Benadryl. It is a long list. But there was no mention of THC, the drug that killed Steve. It is colorless, it is odorless, and it is tasteless, which makes it the perfect thing to give to someone if you want to poison them. The level of THC in the blood of Steve was so high that it was clear that it was the cause of death. It is a lethal level, no matter what way you look at it. The detectives pressed on. Somehow or another, there was a large amount of Visine in his system. So that is what we were trying to get to the bottom of. I know he puts the Visine in his coffee. He puts it in there every day. What do you know about it? What I know about it? I know it makes you have diarrhea. There were basically two things that the police were now considering. One, he was poisoned. There was foul play. Two, he ingested it on his own, whether it was intentional or unintentional. But as police probed the relationship of Steve and Lana, how has your life been? Sometimes we would have fun and everything, and then sometimes I would be on eggshells. All the time I was on eggshells. Lana claimed that Steve had a dark side. He can be really nasty. What does nasty Steve look like? He is really verbally abusive, calling me names. Like what would he call you? I do not know. Stupid bitch. I do not know. Just all kind of things. I could see it escalating until you notice just, try and stay out his way. After the interview of Lana, detectives ordered a search of the house. They were looking for cups or glasses that had a residue in them. They were looking for anything they could find that helped them determine what could have caused this. Anything document-wise that would show trouble in the marriage. But during that time, Lana told the officer that she wanted to speak again with Detective Moats. Detective Moats recorded what Lana had to say. I told you a little bit about Stephen, that it was worse than what I told you. He was verbally and physically abusive. Lana, for God's sake. And yell at me and call me names. His anger built up, I would do something that would irritate him until the point where he would explode. Okay, what are you trying to do? Huh? After he had that incident, which he said it was vertigo, and I was taking care of him and everything, but I was still so angry. And my girlfriend at work told me, you want to get even with somebody, put Visine in a drink. It will cause diarrhea. It was then that Lana dropped a bombshell. When I saw that Visine on the table, it just came back to me, and I just took and squirted it. And what did you squirt it into? His water. Into his water? So you do not know the full amount. I mean, you just squeezed. I think I put the whole thing in. So the whole bottle? I think I did. I squeezed it hard. I just saw it there, and I just did it. What are your plans tonight now? Just stay here. You'll be okay. I know it is a lot on your plate. Just what if I do? What if I cause his death with the Visine? Anything else that you want to add? No. If there is more, get off your chest. That is it. It was a damning confession, but the detectives could not arrest Lana just yet. After Lana confessed, the police left. They got their ducks in a row as far as what charges would be made. And they were ready to come back the next day to arrest Lana Clayton. But early that morning, they got a call from one of the neighbors of Lana. They found notes of suicide. They were afraid that she had harmed herself. She knew the police were coming back the next day, and she knew they would have warrants for arrest. She turned the gas on and went upstairs and took some pills to kill herself. They found her unconscious in her bed. She was taken into the hospital where she was treated and ultimately released, and then immediately arrested on the charges of murder and tampering with food items. The family was informed of the arrest of Lana. A detective from York County called me and said, "Hey, Nick, I just want to bring you up to speed here." Lana confessed, and I pulled over right away. It hit me like a ton of bricks, literally like a baseball bat to the face. I answered the phone, and Rosemary was on the other end screaming that she killed him. On January 16th, 2020, Lana accepted a plea deal and admitted guilt on charges of voluntary manslaughter and tampering with a drug or food product. The original indictment was for murder. You were pleading to a lesser offense, voluntary manslaughter. My own knowledge of IC was by watching movies and the cause of discomfort and diarrhea. Lana insisted she never intended for Steve to die and just wanted revenge for his abuse. But his friends and family did not buy that Steve was ever abusive. She tried to assassinate the character of Steve because other people who knew him and who he had. Many came forward to say he was a wonderful person. There was no abuse of any sort with Stephen. She was trying to do whatever she could to save herself from a very, very, very long sentence and possibly the death penalty. But he was a gentle soul, not capable of harming someone. Based on the toxicology report, the prosecutors believe Steve suffered for 3 days before dying. Lana told us that the fatal dose was on Thursday morning. But we know as a matter of scientific fact from the toxicologist that is impossible. He would have died Thursday morning if he had ingested that Thursday morning. For him to have been sick all of that time, it indicates that she continually gave him medication throughout that time, poisoned him with Visine little by little. And Lana, a nurse, never sought to help him after the initial poisoning. Stephen would not have stayed in a urine-soaked mattress. He was a clean freak. He would not have stood for such a thing. He was too weak to get up and move. There was no phone in the house. There was no landline, so he could not call somebody. So this put him in a situation of being tortured with no way to get help. And so finally she knew Saturday, that is it. And she squeezed a whole bottle of Visine into his water, had him drink it, and then went out to mow the grass, so she did not have to watch the horror of his death. Instead of a nurse that helps, she is the nurse from hell. 53-year-old Lana Clayton was sentenced to 25 years in prison. She never admitted that she intended to kill Steve, but the facts showed otherwise. I feel like there is no penalty that would have been great enough for Lana. This was 3 days of methodically poisoning my best friend, and then killing him. The thought process that had to go into her putting on this charade. And she carried that right on through till the end, and I think that is the definition of a monster. But Lana almost got away with it. There almost was not an autopsy. If there had not been an autopsy, the ruling of the coroner would have been, this was likely a heart episode, and it was natural causes. The truth is she did this to herself, Had she been just the same, quiet, gentle Lana, grieving the loss of Steve, no one would have had any suspicion whatsoever. Although Lana insisted the death of Steve was unintentional. His family and the prosecution believed it was a deliberate act motivated by financial gain. One obvious and glaring motive is the wealth of Steve. Without a will in the state of South Carolina, everything goes to the spouse. So Lana would know, if Steve is gone, I get everything. If somebody wanted to do something malicious like this, all they had to do was get rid of the will, and everything belonged to them. The family tried to move on without Steve in their lives. Hello. I mean, I miss a lot about Steve, but I miss his voice. I miss hearing his voice. This is my way of, getting away from the emotional stuff. I think what I miss about Steve is his over-the-top personality. This big, boisterous, gregarious character that enters a room and just takes over everything. Steve was an amazing person. It has been difficult not having him around. The thing I miss the most about Steve is his laughter and his ability to light up a room. Stephen was stolen from everyone who loved him. Stephen was stolen from everyone who loved him. And while the physical presence of Steve Clayton is gone, his laughter remains in the memories of those he mentored, the family he adored, and the community he built. His story is a testament to the fact that while darkness may sometimes enter our lives, the light of a good man, the love of a brother, and the pursuit of truth will always endure. This is the story of a man whose life was a mosaic of generosity, kindness, and an unwavering belief in the goodness of others. He was a successful businessman, a man who navigated the complex waters of commerce with the steady hand of an experienced sailor. But he never let his professional achievements dull the brilliance of his heart. Hello, hello, hello. That was his signature greeting, a melodic, rhythmic cadence that seemed to announce that someone special had entered the room. He was a man who believed that the best way to live was to lift others up, to mentor those who were starting their own journeys, and to offer a hand to anyone who stumbled along the way. His story begins in the vibrant setting of Miami on the 10th of March, in the year 2007. It was a day of profound significance, a day when his sister, Rosemary Clayton, prepared to unite her life with a man she loved, William Leslie. As the sun cast a warm glow over the gathering, the atmosphere was thick with a mixture of joy and a gentle, lingering sadness. It had been 11 months since they had lost their father, a man who had been the bedrock of their family. Steve Clayton, at 52 years of age, stood as the pillar upon which his sisters leaned. He was the oldest, a figure who had always played the role of a father to his younger siblings, especially to the youngest, Rosemary. When Rosemary asked him if he would walk her down the aisle, the request was met with a flood of tears and an immediate, heartfelt acceptance. There was never a moment, in her estimation, where Steve had not been a central part of her life. He was her big brother, her protector, and her hero. He had been the one who wrestled in high school and played football, the one who turned into a shrewd businessman after graduating college with a degree in finance. He had built a company called Physical Therapy Resources from the ground up, a venture that blossomed into a national operation with centers scattered across the entire country. Yet, despite his professional triumph, Steve's greatest success was the ease with which he connected with people. He met his sister Rosemary at a hospital where they both happened to be, and that chance encounter cemented a bond that would last for the rest of their lives. His goal had been to retire at the age of 40, and though he missed that mark by a single year, retiring at 41, he did not spend his leisure in idle pursuit. Instead, he channeled his energy into the lives of others, mentoring young men, helping them launch their own businesses, and guiding them toward the paths they were meant to take. He was generous with his resources, but even more so with his time. At the wedding of his sister, Steve was the undisputed soul of a celebration. He was the one who could not help but stand up to give a toast. His words always ad-libbed and delivered straight from the heart. He greeted the guests with his familiar, enthusiastic hello, and then, with a vulnerability that few men of his stature dared to show, he spoke to his sister and her new husband. He confessed that he was doing his best to avoid the emotional weight of the moment, to keep the tears at bay, but his love for his family was too profound to mask. He remembered their father, and he promised to continue honoring the memory of the man who had instilled in them the values of integrity and love. When the music started for the father-daughter dance, there was a surprise that left everyone breathless. A recording of their father's voice, a final, cherished sentiment from a man who was physically absent but spiritually present. In that moment, Steve was everything: the brother, the father figure, the protector, and the entertainer. Despite this robust network of family and friends, Steve's own romantic journey had been something of a winding path. He possessed a level of focus and intensity that was rare, and he sought a partner who could mirror that depth. He was looking for someone with whom he could connect on an emotional, intellectual, and spiritual plane, a high standard, perhaps But Steve was not a man who settled for less than a soul-deep connection. That change arrived in late 2009, when he decided to leave the heat of Florida for the rolling landscapes of North Carolina. He was a man who loved the physical world, who thrived on long walks and the freedom of the outdoors. It was in this new chapter that he met Lana Walsh, a nurse who was 12 years his junior, originally from Oklahoma. To those who knew Steve, Lana seemed an unlikely match at first. She was quiet, a wallflower compared to Steve's vibrant, larger-than-life personality. But she was sweet and kind in a way that captured his heart. Steve was enamored. He felt a sense of peace with her that he had not experienced before. They were inseparable, always arm in arm, always sharing a hug or a kiss. It was not long before he persuaded her to move in with him, and soon after, they added members to their family, 2 Italian greyhounds named Guinness and Sadie. Steve finally felt he had found the missing piece of his life. He referred to her as his Lana Sue, and he could not hide the adoration he felt for her. In November of 2013, they were married at their home in Charlotte. It was a beautiful, intimate event, a day that felt like the culmination of Steve's dreams. Not long after, they relocated to a magnificent house on the banks of Lake Wylie in South Carolina. It was a home that looked like a scene from a postcard, decorated with Steve's cherished collection of art and antiques, treasures that reflected his unique spirit. The move brought them closer to his extended family, and they became a fixture in the lives of his niece and her family. They went to concerts, enjoyed dinners, and spent every holiday together. Steve, ever the child at heart, loved nothing more than getting down on the floor to play with the children, entertaining them with games and infectious laughter. There was no dull moment in the Clayton household. It was a sanctuary of joy. For 5 years, their life together seemed to be a picture of happiness. But in June of 2018, the first shadow fell across their world. Steve, a man who was rarely ill, began to complain of vertigo, nausea, and intense headaches. He remembered working in the garden, feeling the world tilt, and then waking up 36 hours later, disoriented and weak. As a nurse, Lana advised him to rest, and the family, trusting in her expertise, felt a measure of relief that she was there to care for him. For a short time, it seemed that the worst had passed. By the 4th of July, Steve was back to his old self, hosting a party that was as vibrant and joyous as any they had hosted before. He was dancing with Lana, kissing her, and appearing completely in love. No one could have suspected that the darkness was only just beginning to gather. On the 21st of July, 2018, the peace of the Clayton home was shattered by a frantic call to the emergency services. When the police arrived, they found Steve at the bottom of the grand staircase, his life already extinguished. Lana was there, devastated and weeping, explaining that Steve had been struggling with his health for days. She told the authorities that she had been mowing the lawn, that she had come inside to find him, and that her attempts to assist him had been in vain. His death was initially treated as a tragedy, perhaps a fall or a sudden heart attack. But there was a dissonance in the air that his family could not shake. When they went to House to Help, they were confronted with a scene that defied explanation. The bedroom mattress was ruined, stained with the evidence of someone who had been unable to leave the bed for days. The smell of neglect was thick, and it stood in stark contrast to the man they knew, a man who was meticulous and clean. When Steve's sister, Rosemary, asked Lana about his will, she was met with a statement that made no sense. Lana claimed there was no will, and she had already moved forward with arrangements to have Steve cremated. Everything about the situation felt rushed, as if someone were trying to erase the evidence of his life before it could be properly examined. The family, driven by a deep, intuitive sense that something was wrong, demanded an investigation. They requested an autopsy and a toxicology report, refusing to accept that such a vibrant, healthy man had simply died of natural causes at the age of 57. The results of the toxicology report were nothing short of a nightmare. Steve's blood contained traces of sedatives. But the most alarming finding was the presence of a substance called tetrahydrozoline, the active ingredient in common eye drops. It was a substance that, when ingested, could shut down the central nervous system, lead to a heart attack, and cause a slow, agonizing death. It was odorless, colorless, and tasteless. The perfect weapon for someone who wanted to cause harm without leaving a trace. The detectives, having uncovered the truth, returned to interview Lana. Initially, she spun a tale of an abusive marriage, claiming that Steve was verbally and physically aggressive and that she was merely retaliating to his mistreatment. She admitted to putting eye drops in his water, claiming that she had only intended to make him sick as an act of revenge, not realizing it would be fatal. The confession was a revelation that hit the family like a physical blow. Their beloved Steve, the man who had mentored so many and loved so deeply, had been systematically poisoned by the person he trusted most. The investigation revealed that this had not been a momentary lapse in judgment, but a prolonged period of cruelty. Steve had been suffering for days, unable to call for help, trapped in a house where his cry for assistance was met with indifference. It was a betrayal that broke the hearts of all who knew him. Lana was ultimately arrested and charged, and in early 2020, she entered a plea of voluntary manslaughter. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. For the family, the verdict brought a measure of justice, but it could never fill the void that Steve had left behind. They were forced to reconcile the man they knew, the generous, boisterous, gregarious Steve, with the circumstances of his untimely death. They chose to remember him not by how he died, but by how he lived. They remembered the way he entered a room and made everyone feel like they were the most important person in the world. They remembered his laughter, which could light up the gloomiest day. They remembered his love for his family, his devotion to his sisters, and his unwavering belief in the potential of the young people he mentored. They remembered the way he danced, the way he told stories, and the way he gave it himself without expecting anything in return. Steve Clayton was a man who lived his life with a wide-open heart. He had built a legacy of kindness that would endure long after his passing. Though he was stolen from the world far too soon, the warmth of his presence remained. In the quiet moments, when his family gathered to share a meal or celebrate a milestone, they could still hear his voice. They could still hear him greeting the world with his enthusiasm, his joy, and his spirit. They continued to live in the light of his memory, holding on to the lessons he had taught them about love, generosity, and the importance of cherish every moment with the ones we hold dear. Steve was, and always would be, a hero to those who were lucky enough to walk by his side. And in the retelling of his story, in the sharing of his laughter, and in the continuation of his acts of kindness, he remained very much alive. The house on the banks of Lake Wylie stood silent, but the legacy of the man who had loved it continued to ripple outward, touching lives and inspiring others to be just a little bit kinder, a little bit more generous, and a little more willing to open their hearts to the people around them. Because in the end, that is what Steve Clayton was about. He was about the human connection, the simple joy of being present for others, and the quiet, steady strength of a life lived for something greater than oneself. His life was a testament to the fact that money and status are secondary to the relationships we forge and the love we leave behind. He was a successful businessman, yes, but he was first and foremost a brother, a friend, and a man who understood that the greatest treasure one can possess is the ability to love without reservation. As the years passed, his family and friends continued to find comfort in the memories of the holidays, the concerts, the games of Scrabble, and the simple act of sitting together and sharing a meal. They held on to the knowledge that Steve had known in his final years, a love that he had been searching for, and even though that love had ultimately betrayed him, it did not diminish the capacity for love that he had carried throughout his entire life. They did not let the tragedy overshadow the beauty of his soul. They became advocates for the values he stood for, ensuring that his name was associated with light and inspiration rather than the darkness of his end. They learned to forgive, not for the sake of the person who had committed the crime, but for their own peace of mind, allowing them to move forward without the heavy burden of hatred. They chose to honor Steve by being the kind of people he would have been proud of. They reached out to others, they offered mentorship, and they kept the spirit of generosity alive in their own communities. Every time they gathered, they would say his name, they would share a laugh about one of his many jokes, and they would remember the way he would look at them with that sparkle in his eyes. The story of Steve Clayton became a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of being vigilant, not just for danger, but for the well-being of the people we love. It taught those around him that sometimes the ones who seem to have it all are the ones who need our support the most. It taught them to be present, to listen, and to notice when something was not quite right, even when the surface appeared calm. It was a lesson in empathy, in observation, and in the enduring power of family. In the small town where he was laid to rest, there was no monument that could truly capture the magnitude of his character. Instead, his monument was built in the hearts of those he had helped, in the success of the businesses he had nurtured, and in the continued laughter of the children who had played at his feet. He was a man who had built a life on the foundation of human connection, and that foundation proved to be the most resilient part of his legacy. He had been a man who believed in second chances, a man who believed that it was never too late to find one's path or to change the direction of one's life. He had been a man who had retired early to give back, a man who had seen the potential in others even when they could not see it themselves. And even in the face of the ultimate betrayal, the love he had fostered continued to grow, bridging the gap between his absence and the reality of their daily lives. They found that the best way to keep his memory alive was to continue to be the people he had helped them become. They were more patient, more generous, and more attentive to one another. They understood that time was the most precious commodity of all, and they did not squander on grievances or small disagreements. They embraced the laughter, they celebrated the milestones, and they supported one another through the challenges of life, just as Steve had done for them. The laughter still echoed in the stories they told, whether it was about the time he tried to do the limbo or his enthusiastic toasts at family gatherings, or the way he could make a simple game feel like the most important event of the day. Those moments were the stitches that held the tapestry of his life together. They were the threads that kept the fabric of their family strong. And so, the story of the businessman who loved and was loved did not end with his death. It continued in the lives of those he touched, in the smiles he inspired, and in the unwavering belief that a life lived with heart is a life that never truly fades away. His family members often found themselves reflecting on the phrase he used to say, that he wanted to retire and do whatever he wanted, and what he wanted to do was to give back. In their own ways, they continued that mission. They were his hands, his voice, and his heart in the world, ensuring that his spirit of generosity continued to touch lives. They turned his dream of giving back into a reality that spanned generations, a legacy that was built not on wealth, but on the enduring power of human kindness. When they looked back at the photographs, they did not see a victim. They saw a man who had lived his life to the fullest. They saw a man who had known passion, who had known the joy of success, and who had known the profound satisfaction of being a source of strength for others. They saw a man who had been imperfect, like all of us, but whose imperfections were eclipsed by the sheer magnitude of his love. And in that vision, they found peace. They found the ability to smile again, to laugh again, and to look toward the future with a sense of hope, knowing that while Steve was no longer physically present, he was, in the most fundamental way, still with them. The lessons he left behind were not just for them. They were for anyone who heard his story. They were lessons about the value of time, the importance of listening, the necessity of trust, and the profound impact of a single act of kindness. His story was a guidepost, a reminder that while the world can be a difficult and sometimes cruel place, it is also a place where love, generosity, and the human spirit can flourish if we allow them to. As the years turned into decades, the sharpness of the pain began to soften, replaced by the warm, amber glow of cherished memory. The family remained close, bonded even tighter by the experiences they had shared. They continued to navigate the ups and downs of life, but they did so with the knowledge that they were part of something greater than themselves. A lineage of love that had been shaped by the influence of a remarkable man. They understood that true success was not measured by the size of one's bank account or the number of one's accomplishments, but by the number of lives one had touched and the depth of the love one had shared. And by that measure, Steve Clayton had been the most successful man they had ever known. He had been a millionaire of the heart, a person who understood that the only currency that mattered in the end was the love we gave away. And so, his story continues, told in the laughter of his nieces and nephews, remembered in the toasts of his sisters, and honored in the way his friends and colleagues continue to carry his message into the world. It is a story that refuses to be defined by his end, but is instead celebrated for the beauty of his journey. It is a story that, in its own way, serves as a beacon of light, reminding us all that even in the darkest of times, the love we have shared remains, a constant and unwavering presence that guides us home. The businessman, the mentor, the brother, the friend, Steve Clayton was all of these things and more. He was a man who had lived with passion, who had loved with his whole heart, and who had left behind a world that was better for his having been in it. And in the quiet of the night, when the stars shone over the lake, where he had once dreamed of a future filled with happiness, his family could almost hear his voice, echoing across the water, clear and bright, calling out the greeting that had defined his life. Hello, hello, hello. It was a call that never faded, a melody that played on in their hearts, a promise that he was never truly gone, as long as there was love to be shared and a story to be told. The lake, once the site of his quiet happiness, remained a place of reflection, a testament to the life he had built and the dreams he had pursued. It served as a reminder that we are all, in a sense, building our own houses on the banks of our own lakes, creating spaces for the people we love, decorating our lives with the things that bring us joy, and striving to make every moment count. Steve's life was an invitation to do just that, to build with intention, to love with abandon, and to leave behind a legacy that would continue to grow long after we are gone. He taught them that it was okay to be vulnerable, to show emotion, and to let others see the depth of our feelings. He taught them that being strong did not mean being stoic, and that being successful did not mean being isolated. He showed them that the most important thing we can do is to be there for one another, to show up for the people we care about, and to offer our support when it is needed most. The legacy of Steve Clayton is not found in the material things he left behind, but in the intangible gifts he bestowed upon everyone he met, the feeling of being valued, the sense of being supported, and the joy of being truly seen. He was a master of the human connection, an architect of relationships, and a champion of the belief that we are all better together. His story also carries a message of caution, a reminder to be aware of the dynamics of our relationships and to pay attention to the subtle shifts that can occur. It serves as a nudge to look beyond the surface, to be curious about the people in our lives, and to never assume that everything is as it appears. It is a lesson in the importance of being present and engaged, and in the value of trusting our instincts when they tell us that something is not right. But above all, the story of Steve Clayton is a celebration of life. It is an affirmation of the human capacity to overcome even the most tragic of circumstances and to find meaning and beauty in the aftermath. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of love. As his friends and family continued to live their lives, they did so with the knowledge that they were part of his story. They were the keepers of his memory, the voices that would tell his tale, and the hearts that would keep his spirit alive. They were the ones who would continue the work he had started, who would offer mentorship, who would share their resources, and who would be there for one another just as he would have wanted. They understood that the best way to honor a man like Steve Clayton was to live in a way that would have made him proud. It meant being kind, being generous, being patient, and being true to oneself. It meant cherishing the people in their lives, holding them close, and never taking a single moment for granted. And so, the legacy of the man who loved life continued to flourish. It was a legacy of light, a legacy of love, and a legacy of hope. It was a story that, while marked by a moment of darkness, was fundamentally defined by the brilliance of the life that had preceded it. It was a story that would be passed down, whispered to children, shared over dinners, and remembered in the quiet moments of the day. The businessman who loved and was loved, the man who had greeted the world with an open heart and a ready smile, was a presence that would never truly leave them. He was in the laughter, he was in the memories, and he was in the love that continued to bind his family together, a force that was stronger than anything that could be taken away. In the end, it was not the wealth he had accumulated or the businesses he had built that mattered. It was the love he had given and the joy he had shared. It was the way he had lived with purpose, with passion, and with an unwavering belief in the goodness of people. That was his true legacy. And it was a legacy that would endure for as long as there were people who remembered the man who had greeted them all with a simple, yet profound, hello. The world is a complex and often unpredictable place, and it is easy to get lost in the noise and the busyness of our daily lives. But every so often, we are reminded of what is truly important. We are reminded of the power of a single life, the impact of a single heart, and the beauty of a single love. Steve Clayton's life was such a reminder. It was a life that mattered, a life that touched others, and a life that left the world a little brighter than he had found it. And for all those who knew him, who loved him, and who continue to carry his memory in their hearts, the world is a different place, a little less bright, perhaps, but filled with the light of his memory, a light that continues to shine, guiding them, comforting them, and reminding them of the man who had once greeted them all with the warmth of his spirit. His sisters, his nephews, his friends, they would all agree that if they had to do it all over again, they would choose him, over and over, every single time. They would choose his laughter, they would choose his generosity, and they would choose the profound impact he had on their lives. They would choose the man who had been their hero, their protector, and their guide, because they knew that the love they had shared was a rare and precious thing, a gift that they would cherish for the rest of their lives. So they kept moving forward, one day at a time, carrying his story with them, sharing his lessons, and living their lives in a way that honored his memory. They understood that the most important work they could do was to be kind, to be generous, and to be present for one another. They were the living testament to a man who had understood that the true measure of a life is not in how much we have, but in how much we give. And in the silence of the night, when the lake was calm and the sky was clear, they would look up and see the stars, and they would know that he was there, watching over them, smiling that smile that had once warmed their hearts and filled their lives with such joy. They were grateful, truly grateful for the time they had had with him, for the love he had given them, and for the man he had been. It is said that to live in the hearts of those we leave behind is to never die. And if that is true, then Steve Clayton lives on, in the stories, in the laughter, and in the love that continues to ripple outward, touching lives and making the world a kinder, more generous place. He was, and he remains, a man who truly understood the art of living, and in the end, that is the most beautiful story of all. The story of a successful and generous businessman who met a nurse with a heart as big as his own was more than just a headline or a case file. It was a story about the complexities of human relationships, the resilience of the heart, and the power of memory to transform a tragedy into a tribute. It was a story that demanded to be heard, not for the sake of the crime, but for the sake of the man who had been lost, and for the sake of the love that had defined his life. As his story draws to a close, we are left with the image of a man who loved his life, who loved his family, and who had finally found the piece of his life he had been searching for. We are left with a reminder that every life is a story, and every story is a legacy, and that the choices we make, the love we share, and the way we treat one another are the things that will ultimately be remembered. Steve Clayton's story was a beautiful one, and it is a story that will be remembered, told, and cherished for many years to come. The chapters of his life were filled with laughter, with challenge, with triumph, and with a deep, abiding love for the people he called his own. And even though the final chapter was written in the ink of tragedy, It did not erase the beauty of what had come before. It did not take away the laughter. It did not diminish the love. And it certainly did not silence the voice of the man who had once greeted the world with such enthusiasm. He remains in the quiet reflections of his family, in the enduring strength of the relationships he fostered, and in the ongoing spirit of generosity that defines his legacy. He remains in the stories they tell, in the laughter they share, and in the love that continues to grow, a living testament to a man who had lived, who had loved, and who had made a difference in the world. And so, we bid farewell to the man whose life was a mosaic of kindness, a life that taught us the value of being present, the importance of being generous, an enduring power of love. We bid farewell to the man who reminded us that even in a world that can be difficult and unpredictable, there's always room for a kind word, a warm smile, and a heart that is open to the possibilities of connection. He was Steve Clayton, and his story is one that will continue to inspire, to touch, and to move all who hear it, a story of life well lived and a legacy that will never fade. For as long as there is love in the world, there will be the memory of the man who had greeted us all with the warmth of his spirit and the brightness of his soul. The journey he traveled was a long and meaningful one, and though it ended sooner than anyone could have expected, the impact he had on those around him will continue to be felt for a lifetime. He was a beacon of light in the lives of his family, a pillar of support for his friends, and a source of inspiration for everyone he met. He was and always will be a cherished part of their lives, a memory that is held close, a story that is told with love, and a spirit that continues to guide them forward. As the years continue to unfold, his family will continue to honor his memory in all the ways he would have loved, by being kind to one another, by supporting the people in their lives, and by never forgetting the importance of being there for those we love. They will continue to tell his stories. They will continue to share his laughter, and they will continue to live their lives in a way that reflects the love he had for them. And in that way, he will never be gone. He will be in the stories they tell. He will be in the love they share. And he will be in the very air they breathe, a constant, loving presence that is as real and as lasting as the memories they hold in their hearts. He is, and always will be, a part of who they are, a part of their history, and a part of their future. He is Steve Clayton, and this is his story, a story of love, of generosity, of family, and of a life that mattered, a story that will be remembered, told, and cherished forever. For in the end, it is not the years in our lives that count, but the life in our years, and Steve Clayton truly lived. It begins with a voice that rings out across a crowded room, buoyant and familiar, commanding the attention of everyone present with a warmth that seems to fill the very air. Hello, hello, hello. This is a story of a man whose heart was as expansive as his generosity, a successful businessman who lived for the happiness of others. It is the story of Steve Clayton, a man who found himself deeply in love, only to discover that the person he trusted most would become the source of his undoing. The date was March 10th, 2007, in the vibrant city of Miami. It was a milestone day for Clayton family, as Rosemary Clayton, Steve's sister, prepared to marry her partner, William Leslie. Steve, at 52 years of age, stood by her side. He was the head of the family, a role he had embraced with quiet dignity and strength, especially after the passing of their father 11 months earlier. As the music swelled and the guests watched with misty eyes, Steve took his sister's hand to walk her down the aisle. He had stepped into their father's place, a gesture born of love and deep-seated devotion. I could not imagine anybody else standing in place for our father, Rosemary would later reflect. It was a sentimental gathering, one where the absence of their father was felt, yet softened by the presence of a brother who had always been a father figure to his 4 sisters. Steve was the eldest by 10 years, a constant, guiding force in their lives. He was their hero, the big brother who played football, wrestled in high school, and seemed larger than life. After excelling in college with a degree in finance, he matured into a shrewd and capable businessman. With a partner, he co-founded a national company called Physical Therapy Resources. building a network of centers that spanned the country. Steve lived life with purpose, and his goal was clear. He intended to retire at the age of 40. He missed that deadline by a mere year, stepping away from the professional world at 41, a man who had earned his freedom. Retirement did not mean idleness for Steve. It meant he finally had the time to invest in what mattered most, people. He became a mentor to a legion of young men, offering not just his professional expertise, but his time and his belief in their potential. He was exceptionally generous, his resources and his wisdom always available to those who needed a steady hand. He was, as those who knew him best would describe, a man who lived to give. When his sister Rosemary married, it was Steve who provided the light and laughter of the occasion. He was never one to shy away from the spotlight when it came to celebrating those he loved. During the reception, he stood with a microphone, ready to give a toast. "Hello, hello, hello," he repeated, his smile broad and infectious. His speeches were never rehearsed. They were spoken from the heart, ad-libbed with a kind of sincerity that left not a dry eye in the house. He spoke to William, thanking him for making his sister happy, and honored the memory of their father. He shared a powerful moment during the father-daughter dance when a recording of their late father played, a surprise that left everyone feeling the depth of the family bond. Steve was the glue, the entertainment, the one who kept the peace and the joy alive. Yet, despite his professional success and his close-knit family, Steve's romantic life had been a complex journey. He was a man of high standards, looking for a partner who possessed the same focus, determination, and capacity for love that he did. It was a tall order, but his family always believed he would find his match. In late 2009, Steve made the decision to leave the familiar sunshine of Florida for a new chapter in North Carolina. He loved the outdoors, the chance to be active, and the change of pace that the mountains offered. It was there, within just a few months, that he made a discovery that would change the trajectory of his life. He announced that he had met someone special. Her name was Lana Walsh. She was 12 years his junior, a nurse who had grown up in Oklahoma. To those who met her, she seemed quiet, almost like a wallflower, which stood in stark contrast to Steve's gregarious, larger-than-life personality. Yet, Steve was captivated. He seemed to possess a glow that had been absent for a long time. They were inseparable, always walking arm in arm, Steve constantly showering her with affection. It was not long before they moved in together, and before they knew it, they had added new members to their family, a pair of Italian greyhounds named Guinness and Sadie. With Lana, Steve felt he had found the missing piece of his puzzle. He called her his Lana Sue, and he could not hide his adoration. He appeared to have found a sense of peace, a groundedness that he had been searching for all his life. In November 2013, surrounded by friends and family who had traveled to North Carolina to witness the union, Steve and Lana were married. It was a beautiful, intimate event held at their home. Shortly after, the couple decided to relocate once more, moving into a stunning home on the banks of Lake Wylie in South Carolina. It was a postcard-perfect setting, a gorgeous blue home overlooking the water. They spent their days decorating, filling the rooms with Steve's collection of art and antiques. They were close to family, and they were happy. The years that followed were filled with the simple joys of life. They hosted concerts, attended family events, and spent time with Lana's son and grandchildren. Steve, a child of heart, was the uncle and grandfather who would get down on the floor to play games, who would engage in silly antics just to hear the children laugh. He was a teddy bear, always game for a bit of fun. For 5 years, their life appeared to be a model of domestic contentment. Then, in June 2018, the light began to dim. Steve suddenly fell ill. He complained of dizziness, nausea, and vertigo. He had been working in the garden, and initially it seemed like sunstroke, but the symptoms persisted. He remembered lying down, and the next thing he knew, 36 hours had passed. Lana, as a nurse, took charge of his care, and the family felt reassured that he was in capable hands. They trusted her. They believed she was doing everything she could. Just 2 weeks later, The resilience that defined Steve seemed to return. He threw a 4th of July party, and for a fleeting moment, everything seemed normal again. He was his affectionate self, dancing with Lana, surrounded by family. No one suspected that this would be the last celebration. On July 21st, 2018, the call came into the York County 911 dispatch. Police units arrived to find a scene of quiet tragedy. Steve Clayton lay at the bottom of the grand staircase, his life extinguished. Lana was distraught, crying, telling officers that Steve had been struggling with vertigo for days. She told them he had collapsed, that she had tried to care for him, but that ultimately he had fallen. The responding officer, Sergeant Day, navigated the labyrinthine house, noting the lack of struggle and the absence of any signs of foul play. The initial assessment by the coroner suggested a heart attack, citing the discoloration on his chest. The family was devastated. The shock of his death rippled through them like a tidal wave. They could not fathom how a man so vital, so full of life, could simply be gone. But as the days followed, the reality of the situation began to unravel. When family members went upstairs to the master bedroom to help clear the space, they were met with a disturbing sight. The mattress was soaked through, stained with human waste and urine. It was a smell that permeated the room, a sign of neglect that was entirely inconsistent with the man Steve was. He was a person who took pride in his home, who was meticulous in his habits. The discovery of the soiled mattress, coupled with the revelation that there was no will, an impossibility for a man as fiscally responsible as Steve, began to plant seeds of doubt in the minds of his relatives. When Rosie, Steve's sister, spoke to Lana on the phone, she learned that Steve had supposedly been ill for days, yet no one had been called. Lana claimed that Steve's cell phone had been missing for a week. Another claim that struck the family as impossible. Steve had been tethered to his phone. It was his lifeline. The family, driven by a deep-seated instinct that something sinister had occurred, reached out to the medical examiner's office and requested an autopsy and a toxicology report. The initial results of the autopsy were inconclusive, pointing toward heart disease. But the family waited, living in a state of suspended animation, for the toxicology report. When those results finally arrived, the world turned upside down. The report revealed traces of several sedatives, including marijuana, temazepam, and Benadryl. But the most damning evidence was the presence of tetrahydrozoline, known as the active ingredient in eye drops like Visine. Tetrahydrozoline is a substance never intended for human ingestion. In small doses, it causes nausea and dizziness. In large quantities, it acts as a deadly poison, shutting down the central nervous system. The levels of the substance in Steve's blood were lethal. It was clear that this was not a natural death. It was a murder. Detective modes of the York County Sheriff's Office began the investigation, leading to a confrontational interview with Lana Clayton. When questioned about the medications found in her husband's system, Lana's story began to fracture. She spoke of Steve's alleged verbal and physical abuse. Painting a picture of a marriage that was far from the idyllic union it appeared to be. She claimed he was nasty, verbally abusive, and that she had been living on edge. During the course of the investigation, Lana dropped a bombshell. She admitted that she had been adding the eye drops to Steve's drinks. She claimed it was an act of revenge, a way to make him feel the discomfort she felt he had caused her. She confessed to squeezing the bottle into his water, though she claimed she never intended for him to die. It was a confession that laid bare the cold, calculated nature of the act. She had been poisoning him slowly, bit by bit, until the final, fatal dose. The aftermath of the confession was a whirlwind of sorrow and shock. Before she could be arrested, Lana attempted to take her own life, but she survived and was eventually taken into custody. On January 16th, 2020, she accepted a plea deal, admitting guilt to charges of voluntary manslaughter and tamper with a food product. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. The family, however, remained haunted by the truth. They knew that Steve had not died in a moment of sudden impulse, but that he had suffered for days, trapped in a house with no way to call for help, while his wife systematically poisoned him. They rejected her narrative of abuse, remembering Steve as a gentle, generous soul who mentored others and loved with his whole heart. They believed the motive was clear: financial gain, a desire to inherit everything in the absence of a will. Steve Clayton's story is a tragedy of betrayal, a stark reminder that the people we bring into our inner circles, the people we share our lives with, are not always who they appear to be. Yet, even in the shadow of this darkness, the memory of Steve remains vibrant. Those who loved him continue to speak of his laughter, his over-the-top personality, and his ability to light up a room. He was a man who lived a life of connection, and though he was stolen from those who cherished him, the impact of his life, his kindness, his mentorship, and his joy continues to ripple through the lives of everyone he touched. He was, and always will be, a hero to his sisters, a mentor to his friends, and a man whose capacity for love was his greatest legacy. The house on the lake is quiet now, but the echo of his voice, that joyous hello, 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 lingers in the hearts of those who carry his story forward. This is the story of a man whose generosity was only matched by his lust for life. He was a successful and selfless businessman who moved through the world with a booming laugh and an open heart. He was the kind of person who would enter a room and immediately become the center of gravity, drawing everyone into his orbit with a friendly hello. To those who knew him best, he was more than a brother or friend. He was a hero, a steady anchor in the lives of his family members. He was a man who met a woman whose quiet demeanor initially struck those around her as sweet and unassuming. He fell in love with her with the entirety of his being. He was a man who could not hide his feelings, a man who wore his heart on his sleeve and his devotion to her in every action. But the story took a turn that no one could have anticipated, as a strange and consuming sickness began to unravel the tapestry of their marriage. It was a story of a life stolen, not by nature, but by human calculation, in a case where money and status provided no protection against a quiet and invisible darkness. The story begins on the 10th of March, 2007, in Miami, Florida. It was a beautiful, monumental day for the bride, Rosemary Clayton, and her entire family. She was preparing to marry the man she loved, William Leslie. Steve Clayton, her oldest brother, 52 years of age, stood by her side. He was a man who had always taken care of his own, and now he stood ready to walk her down the aisle. Only 11 months prior to this wedding, the family had suffered the profound loss of their father. Rosie had asked her brother to step into their father's place for this momentous occasion. Of course, there were tears deep and heavy as the family gathered for a moment so precious, yet touched with the lingering grief of a missing patriarch. When the officiant asked who gave this woman to be married to this man, Steve replied that he did so in the memory of their father. It was a sentimental, deeply moving moment. With their father's passing, Steve had officially become the head of the family. He had never had children of his own, but he had always been a father figure to his younger siblings. Steve had 4 sisters, and Rosie was the youngest. He was 10 years older than her, so there was never a moment in her life when Steve was not there. He was her big brother, her hero, the man who played football and wrestled in high school, appearing to her as a figure larger than life. After graduating from high school, Steve pursued his education and earned a degree in finance, quickly maturing into a shrewd and capable businessman. He partnered with a colleague to start a company known as Physical Therapy Resources. Through hard work and vision, that company grew into a national powerhouse with physical therapy centers spread across the country. It was in one of these hospitals that Steve and Rosie met, in a way,